My name is Leah Townsend, and I turned 34 at my mother's dining room table. The candles weren't even lit yet when my mom leaned over to my dad and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch it. Since everyone's here, have your son changed the locks at her apartment? Her apartment? Mine. The one I bought with my own money. The one my 7-year-old son sleeps in. My dad nodded without looking up from his plate. My brother Kyle set down his fork, murmured something about a phone call, and walked out with his key ring. My family kept passing the potatoes. I smiled and complimented the pot roast. 1 hour later, Kyle came back through that front door with a face the color of hospital sheets, leaned down to Mom's ear, and whispered, "Mom, there." He never finished the sentence. Here's what nobody at that table knew. I already understood exactly what was waiting for him in my parking lot, because I had spent 6 weeks quietly building it. Ever since a declined debit card at a pharmacy counter started me pulling a thread that ended inside a manila folder in my mother's china hutch and showed me what my parents had been doing to me for 12 years. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where women who stayed quiet for years finally tell you exactly how they walked away. If stories about family, betrayal, and hard-won boundaries speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now let me take you back 6 weeks. 6 weeks before that dinner, my life was small and good and mine. I work nights in the ICU at St. Camillus in Dayton, which means I know how to stay calm while everything beeps. 12-hour shifts, then home to my condo in Maple Crossing over in Kettering, 15 minutes from the house I grew up in. I bought that condo in 2021, and I can still tell you what it felt like to turn the key the first time. 29 years old, and it was the first door that was ever only mine. My son Noah was 7 that summer, all elbows and questions, learning to ride his bike in the parking lot while my neighbor Walt yelled encouragement from his porch. Walt Hendricks is 68, a retired sheriff's deputy with 30 years on the job, a slow porch swing, and an old beagle named Biscuit who supervises the whole complex. Tuesdays, I drove across town to my parents' house for dinner because Tuesday dinner was on my mother's calendar, and things on my mother's calendar happened whether you wanted them to or not. That week, she called me twice about my birthday. "We're doing it here, honey. Family only." Her voice had a sweetness to it that I hadn't heard since I was a kid, and I remember standing at my kitchen counter with the phone against my shoulder, frowning at nothing. My mother has planned every holiday my family has ever had, but she had not thrown me a birthday dinner since I was 12. I told myself people soften. I told myself 61 does that to a woman. Then I finished the dishes, checked on Noah, and folded the thought away the way you fold a shirt you know you'll never wear. 2 days later, a pharmacy card reader would unfold it for me. You should know what my job was in the Townsend family, because it wasn't daughter. I was the fixer. At 16, I was the one reading the water bill at the kitchen table because Dad's eyes got tired. At 19, I did my parents' taxes for the first time, and I did them every spring after that. I managed Dad's blood pressure pills into a little day-of-the-week box. When the furnace died, when the insurance lapsed, when Kyle's landlord threatened to evict him, the phone rang in my pocket. My mother had a phrase for it, delivered like a blessing. That's what family does. Looking back, I can count 3 times in my life that sentence arrived without a favor attached. Here's the strange part, the part I'm still embarrassed to say out loud. I handled everyone's paperwork except my own. When I turned 18, Dad set up a gray file box in his den and said he'd keep my important documents safe. Birth certificate, social security card, the savings bond from Grandma Margaret. It felt like being taken care of. I was a scholarship kid working prep cook shifts through nursing school. I liked believing somebody was minding the deep stuff so I could mind the double shifts. I paid my rent, then my mortgage, through my little credit union, always on time, and I never once pulled my own credit report. I know how that sounds, coming from a woman who reads lab values for a living. But you don't audit the people who taught you to ride a bike. You just keep showing up on Tuesdays, passing the potatoes, doing their taxes. It took me 16 years to learn what was in that gray file box besides my birth certificate. It took one declined debit card to start the lesson. It happened at the CVS on Dorothy Lane on a Thursday afternoon. Noah had an ear infection. I had his antibiotics in one hand and my debit card in the other, and the reader flashed declined in gray letters. I ran it again. Declined. The backup card I keep for emergencies came up, suspected fraud. Call issuer. There was a line behind me, a teenager with energy drinks, an older woman with a cane, all of them politely studying the gum display while my face went hot. I paid with the crumpled 20s in the bottom of my purse, got Noah's medicine, and sat in my car in the parking lot doing the thing I do at work when a monitor starts screaming. Slow breath. Look at the numbers. That night, after Noah was asleep, I signed up for one of those free credit monitoring apps, the kind I'd been telling myself for years I didn't need. It loaded my file, and I sat there reading my own name like it belonged to a stranger. There was a Visa card on my report opened in 2022. I have never applied for a visa in my life. Balance, $4,800. Status, 60 days past due. That one delinquent account had dragged my credit score down a cliff, which is why a nurse with a spotless payment history got humiliated over a $14 prescription. My hands were steady. I want that on the record. 12 years in the ICU will do that for you. I clicked into the account details looking for the fraudster's address, expecting some drop house in Florida, some stranger's P.O. box. The billing address was a house on Kettering Avenue in Dayton, a house I know better than my own. I grew up in it. I did what you're supposed to do, in the order you're supposed to do it. Friday morning, I called the bank that issued the mystery visa, sat through hold music, and told the fraud department this account was not mine. I put a 90-day fraud alert on my file. I asked them to mail me copies of the application and the statements. The woman on the phone was kind, tired, and thorough, and near the end she read me the contact information listed on the account, just to verify. The phone number wasn't mine. It was a landline. I could have recited it in my sleep, because it has been my parents' kitchen phone since 1998. I thanked her in my calm nurse voice and hung up and stared at my own reflection in the black of the microwave door. And a memory surfaced, one I hadn't touched in years. When I was 27, a few months after Noah was born, I got a letter about a credit inquiry I didn't recognize. I did ask about it. I drove to my parents' house with the letter in my purse and put it on the kitchen table, and Dad chuckled and pulled a folded page from the file box in his den. Bank letterhead, an apology, something about a clerical error that had been resolved. Mom patted my hand. Bank error, sweetheart. Your father already handled it. You have a newborn. Go worry about him. The alert I'd set expired on its own 90 days later, the way they do. I remembered thinking at the time that the letterhead looked off somehow, the paper too bright, the logo a shade too blue. Then the baby cried, and I let it go. Sitting in my kitchen 7 years later, I finally let myself finish the thought I'd started at 27. Saturday morning, Walt was out front fixing the latch on the fence gate that the HOA had been ignoring since spring, because Walt fixes things the way other men watch football. I held the gate steady while he worked the screwdriver, and Biscuit lay in the grass, supervising us both. He told me a story about his deputy days, about a forgery case from 1989 where a man's own sister had signed his name better than he could. 30 years on the job taught me one thing, kid, he said, tightening the last screw. Paper never lies. People do. I came within one breath of telling him everything right there at the fence. I had the sentence loaded. Something has been happening with my accounts, and I could feel how good it would be to hand the weight to someone with a bad-shaped memory, but I've been the strong one so long that asking for help feels like undressing in public. Since the divorce, my world had narrowed to Noah, the ICU, and this parking lot, and I'd gotten used to carrying things alone, so I said something about the HOA instead. My phone rang while Walt was still holding the screwdriver, and I answered without checking, and my mother's voice came through bright as a bell. You're still holding Saturday for your birthday, aren't you? Wait, Wednesday. We moved it to Wednesday, did I tell you? She had not told me. She talked for 4 more minutes about a cake from Ashley's bakery, about how Aunt Ruth was coming, about family being together, and I stood there watching Biscuit sleep and feeling the hair rise on my arms. My mother had not baked, bought, or acknowledged a birthday cake for me in 22 years. Now she was calling twice a week about one. Walt watched me hang up. "Everything all right?" he said. "I'm not sure yet," I told him. It was the most honest thing I'd said all month. Sunday night I had a shift, and ICU nights have quiet hours if you're lucky, the kind where the monitors hum and the coffee goes cold. I used my break to request my full credit reports, all 3 bureaus, the real ones. The break room printer gave me about 40 pages, and I read them at 2 in the morning the way I read a chart on a crashing patient. Fast first, then slow. It was worse than one visa. There was a card opened in 2014, another in 2016, a department store card in 2017, a personal loan in 2019, $12,000, paid off and closed. Cards in 2020 and 2022. Some accounts were dead and buried. Others were alive and hungry. 9 accounts total. 12 years of history. None of it mine. All of it wearing my name like a borrowed coat. I made myself a list with the tab pens I use for care plans, and the dates lined up into a shape I didn't want to see. The first card was opened in June of 2014. I graduated nursing school in June of 2014. It was the same month I carried my boxes out of my parents' house, 1 month shy of 22, so proud of my new apartment key I'd put it on its own ring. Somebody had waited for me to move out, and then, that same week, opened a door behind me with my own name on it. I sat in that break room with my cold coffee and my 40 pages, and Denise from the cardiac wing stuck her head in to ask if I was okay. I said I was reading up on something, which was true. I was reading 12 years of my own life, written by somebody else's hand. Over the next 3 days, I turned my kitchen table into a caseboard. Every account got a row. Opened when, balance what, status which. The totals came out cold and specific, the way I like numbers. $19,400 in open balances currently rotting under my name, and one detail repeated down the page like a heartbeat. Every single account listed the same mailing address for statements. Not my condo, not my old apartment, the house on Kettering Avenue. For 12 years, every bill, every late notice, every important changes to your account envelope had been delivered to my childhood bedroom, where I couldn't see them and somebody else could. That's when the thing I'd been calling a mystery quietly became a method. The inquiry letter when I was 27 hadn't been an error. It had been a near miss, the one time a notice leaked out to my real address, and it had been handled, with letterhead just a shade too blue. I got a legal pad and wrote down the only 2 names that fit every fact. Who had my social security number since birth? Who kept my documents in a gray file box? Who controlled the mailbox on Kettering Avenue? Who answered that 1998 landline? I wrote the names, and then I scratched them out. And then I wrote them again. And my hand was not steady that time, and I'm telling you that on the record too. My parents. I sat there a long while listening to the refrigerator hum. Then I squared the pages, clipped them, and put them in a folder. Because at work, when the numbers say something you don't want to know, you don't argue with the numbers. You order more tests. Tessa found me at shift change with my folder under my arm and read my face the way nurses do. I told her a version of it, the short version in the stairwell. Her advice was immediate and human. Call your mother. Ask her straight out. Maybe there's an explanation. And I loved her for it, but I heard myself answer in my charge nurse voice. You don't wake a patient to ask if they're bleeding. You check the chart. If I called Mom now, I'd get tears, a story, and a bonfire of paperwork by morning. So I chose the quiet road. I filed nothing publicly yet, said nothing at Tuesday dinner, changed nothing in my voice. But that week I put a hard freeze on my credit at all 3 bureaus. Not an alert this time, a freeze. The kind where nothing new opens without a pin that only I hold. It felt like locking a door from the inside for the first time in my life. 2 days later, my phone rang, and it was my mother. and her voice had lost some sweetness. "Leah, what did you do with the bank? Somebody called for your father about a verification and it wouldn't go through." She said it lightly, wrapped in an eye roll. Bureaucrats these days. I looked out my window at the parking lot and asked, pleasantly, "Which bank?" She moved past the question like it was furniture. And there it was. The first loose thread. My freeze was invisible. Private. Brand new. And somehow, within 48 hours, it had inconvenienced my mother. I told her banks make mistakes all the time and hung up gently. If you've ever sat across a dinner table from someone you love, holding a question that could burn the whole house down, you know that silence. Tell me in the comments how long you carried yours. And if you're new here, subscribe, because what I found at the county recorder's office changed everything. After that phone call, I stopped being a daughter with a bad feeling and became what I actually am, a professional who documents. I bought a 3-ring binder and a pack of colored tabs, and I built my case the way I build a chart. Nothing goes in without a source. Green tabs for accounts, yellow for dates, red for anything that touched money in motion. On the inside of my closet door, where Noah wouldn't see it, I taped a timeline. 2014 at the top, the present at the bottom. Index cards for every event I could prove with paper. My rule was simple, and it never bent. If I couldn't hold a document that said it happened, it didn't go on the wall. Feelings don't survive cross-examination, paper does. Walt would have been proud of the rule, though I hadn't told him yet. It was the personal loan that stopped me cold that week. $12,000, opened and disbursed in March of 2019, paid off faithfully and closed. A model little loan, the kind that builds credit. Somebody had used it and fed it and buried it neatly. I stood at my closet door with the index card in my hand, trying to place March 2019, and then I didn't have to try anymore. Noah was born March 15th, 2019. I spent that month in a hospital bed at Miami Valley with a blood pressure cuff on my arm and a preeclampsia diagnosis on my chart, being told not to stand up too fast. While I was learning to nurse my son, somebody was signing my name across town for $12,000. I pinned the card to the timeline and wrote one question under it in red pen. What else did I sign in March 2019? I didn't know yet that the county keeps an answer to that question in a filing cabinet and that it costs $2 to photocopy. Tuesday dinner that week was a masterclass, and I attended it like an anthropologist. My mother ran the table the way she runs everything, conducting forks and conversation with the same wrist. Pot roast for Dad, extra carrots for Kyle, who came in 20 minutes late in his work boots and got his plate warmed without asking. Mom asked about my shifts in a way that wasn't asking, told me the condo was so far from family, which is a strange thing to call 15 minutes, and reminded everyone that Ashley's Bakery wanted the final head count for my birthday cake. Dad peeled the label off his beer bottle and contributed weather. I watched them pass dishes and I thought, $19,400, and you're worried about head count. Toward the end, I set down my glass and said, easy as anything, that some of my mail had been coming to their house by mistake, old habits from college, and could they just hand it to me unopened going forward? I'd been missing things. The table did a small, polite freeze. Mom smiled with her whole face except her eyes. Family doesn't need permission, she said, and speared a carrot. Not an apology, not even a denial, a policy statement. I smiled back and said, of course, silly me, and inside I felt something settle into place like a bone going back in its socket. On my way to the kitchen with the dishes, I passed the china hutch, the glass one with the plates nobody eats off, and I saw it. A manila folder lying flat under the good napkins, one corner sticking out, soft and worn like it got handled a lot. I had my hand on the hutch door when my mother appeared beside me and closed it, smooth as a curtain. Those napkins are for Easter, she said. It was July. The birthday planning got stranger from there, and I let it, because you learn things by letting people talk. Mom called Thursday to confirm Wednesday. Family only, just us and Ruth and the cousins. And then, mid-sentence, took a detour that I have replayed 100 times since. You still keep your important papers in that little fireproof box, don't you? The gray one from Target? I said something non-committal. She pressed, light as powdered sugar. Well, you should. With you at work nights and nobody home, papers should be locked up. Does anyone look in on the place while you're gone? I told her Walt kept an eye on things, which she waved off. That old man with the dog. And then she offered, generous as a queen, to take Noah the night of my party. Overnight, so you can relax. Have a glass of wine. He can sleep in Kyle's old room. Every cell in my body that has ever run a rapid response went quiet and cold at once. I thanked her and said Noah already had a sleepover planned with my friend Tessa's boys, which wasn't true yet, but became true one phone call later. When I hung up, I wrote 3 index cards for the closet door. 1. Mom asked about the firebox. 2. Mom asked who watches the condo. 3. Mom wants Noah out of my apartment on Wednesday night. I stood back and looked at the wall, and the wall looked back, and neither of us could name the shape yet. That's the honest truth of it. I want to tell you, I saw the whole play coming, but all I saw were pieces sliding toward each other. What I knew for certain was smaller and sharper. My mother had never once cared where I kept my papers. Now it was the second thing she asked about, right after the cake. Monday morning, instead of sleeping after my shift, I drove downtown to the Montgomery County Recorder's office with a coffee and a hunch. If somebody had been moving money in my name for 12 years, somewhere there might be paper with a stamp on it, because banks like stamps. I gave the clerk my name and $2, and she gave me the answer to the red pen question on my closet door. It was a power of attorney: general, durable, financial. Grantor, Leah Townsend. Attorneys in fact, Frank and Carol Townsend, jointly and severally, full authority over accounts, loans, and property. Signed and notarized on March 14, 2019, at a notary's office on the far side of Dayton, a 40-minute drive from Miami Valley Hospital. I stood at that counter and read my own signature. A good signature, confident, looped exactly the way I loop it. Dated on a day when I could not walk to the bathroom without a nurse holding my arm. I was admitted March 12th with preeclampsia. Noah came March 15th. I was discharged the 19th. On the 14th, I was in a bed with wires on my chest, and according to Montgomery County, I was also across town, standing before a notary, cheerfully signing my financial life over to my parents. The document had 2 witness lines, the way Ohio likes. The first witness was the notary's assistant, some name I didn't know. The second witness line was there too, but on the office scan, the signature had gone through a bad copier somewhere in 2019, and it was a smear, a ghost of a name I couldn't read no matter how I turned the page. I paid for 3 certified copies. On the day someone swore I stood before a notary, I couldn't stand it all. That fact went to the top of the timeline, in red, underlined twice. A power of attorney is a skeleton key, and once I knew it existed, the whole 12 years reorganized itself around it. The 2019 loan? The POA signed for it. The newer cards, the address changes, the accounts that answered to my parents' landline, all of it suddenly had a spine. Banks don't ask many questions when you hand them a notarized document. That's the entire point of notarized documents. I spent 2 evenings matching dates. Every major account action after March 2019 sat downstream of that one piece of paper like towns below a dam. Then I called my own credit union, the little one on Far Hills where I'd gotten my mortgage, because I needed to hear that my actual house was safe. The loan officer, a sweet man named Gary who keeps butterscotch candies on his desk, pulled my file and reassured me. Mortgage current, title clean, nothing weird. And then, because small credit unions are chatty, he added one more thing. Funny timing though. We got a verification request on your property last month from another lender. Routine, but I didn't recognize the outfit. I asked what kind of verification. Asset and lien check, the kind that comes in when somebody's underwriting something. I thanked Gary, hung up, and sat very still at my kitchen table while the refrigerator hummed its one note. Everything else in my binder was history. Money already taken, doors already closed. This was different. Underwriting is a word from the present tense. Somewhere out there, a lender I'd never heard of was actively checking what my condo was worth and what was owed on it, which is a thing that happens for exactly one reason. Something new was being built in my name, and it wasn't finished yet. For the first time since the pharmacy line, I wasn't investigating a crime. I was interrupting one. I want to be honest about the cost, because this part matters more than the paperwork. That Friday, Noah wandered into my room while I was updating the closet door and asked why Mommy had a puzzle taped up where her sweaters go. I told him it was a game for work, a matching game, and he accepted that the way 7-year-olds accept things, and asked if he could have the red pen when I was done. I said yes, and he patted off, and I closed the closet and stood in my bathroom with both hands on the sink for a long time. It wasn't the money doing that to me. I've been broke. Broke is survivable. Broke has protocols. It was the arithmetic of trust. 12 years of Tuesday dinners. Call it 600 pot roasts. And through every single one of them, the two people at the head of that table knew what was writing in my name and let me pass the potatoes anyway. I kept thinking about my grandmother, Margaret Townsend, Dad's mother, gone since 2021. Blunt little woman, drove a Buick until she was 82, kept peppermints in her coat pocket for Noah. Near the end, living at my parents' place, she'd grabbed my wrist once in her kitchen chair and said, "Apropos of nothing, this family eats its quiet ones. Don't be quiet the wrong way." I'd laughed it off then, kissed her head, and topped up her tea. Standing at that sink, I finally heard the sentence the way she'd meant it. A warning passed from one quiet one to another. The next morning, I washed my face, made pancakes, watched cartoons with my son, and bought a second pack of index cards on the way to work. There would be exactly one night of standing at the sink. That was the budget, and I kept to it. Walt came to me before I went to him, which tells you everything about Walt. Sunday evening, he knocked. 2 sharp knocks, deputy knocks, and stood on my mat with biscuit and a look I recognized from work. "Bad news?" Delivered carefully. "Might be nothing," he said. "There's a gray sedan been through the lot twice this week. Slow. Tuesday and again this morning. Fella in it took pictures of your door. Both doors, front and back." I asked how he knew it was my door and not the building. Walt gave me the look 30 years of patrol gives a man. "Because I watched him line up the shot, kid. He photographed your lock." He'd written the plate number on the back of a hardware store receipt. Out of habit. The way other men hum. I stood there holding that receipt, and the dam I'd built between my private mess and the rest of the world just quietly gave way. I invited him in, put on coffee, and told him a part of the truth. Accounts in my name. A document that couldn't be real. My own mother asking odd questions about my firebox. Walt listened the way good cops listen, without twitching. When I finished, he said the single most useful sentence anyone had said to me in 6 weeks. "You don't need a shoulder, you need a case number." Then he made a call to an old friend still working, read out the plate, said twice, and hung up. "Sedan's registered to a business," he said. "Locksmith outfit over in Dayton, commercial account." We looked at each other across my kitchen table. I had a folder full of past tense crimes and one present tense mystery, and now I had a locksmith photographing my deadbolt. Neither of us could make the pieces kiss yet. Biscuit sighed under the table like he'd seen this case before and knew how it ended. The last Tuesday dinner before my birthday was the sweetest one in years, and that's how I knew we were close to something. Mom had gone full hostess. The Ashley's bakery cake was ordered. 3 layers, lemon, don't argue, Aunt Ruth confirmed. The cousins confirmed. A tablecloth I'd never seen ironed and waiting on the sideboard like a flag before a parade. Dad had 2 beers instead of 1 and still didn't finish his sentences. Kyle showed up on time for once, freshly washed truck gleaming in the driveway, and held forth about how good it ran now. "Best thing I ever did was get that loan gone. and Mom smiled into the green beans, and the comment rolled by like weather. I filed it anyway. By then, I filed everything. The moment that mattered came from Noah, who was coloring at the end of the table. He looked up at my mother with the flat candor of a second grader and asked, "Grandma, why do you have a key to my house?" The table went quiet for half a beat too long. Mom laughed her hostess laugh and ruffled his hair. "Family doesn't need permission, sweetheart." Second time I'd heard the policy. But driving home, it was the key itself I kept turning over. She did have one. I'd given it to her myself in 2021, back when she'd helped hang curtains the week I moved in. What she didn't know, because I'd never announced it, was that I'd swapped that lock in 2023, after the divorce, when a locksmith rekeyed both doors in an afternoon. The key in my mother's junk drawer was a key to a door that no longer existed, which meant if she wanted into my apartment, my papers, my firebox, good manners and old brass wouldn't do it. She would need a professional. Say, one with a gray sedan. I stayed late that night to help with dishes, which surprised no one, because the fixer always stays. Mom took a phone call out on the back porch, voice dropping as the door closed, and Dad went to watch the 10 o'clock news. And for 4, maybe 5 minutes, I was alone in the dining room with the china hutch. The folder was still under the Easter napkins. I'm not going to dress this up. I opened my mother's hutch, and I looked, because by then I had earned the looking. The manila folder was soft at the corners, opened 100 times, and inside was my name. Page after page of ruled paper, and on every line, in ink that changed color as the years went by, one signature practiced over and over: Leah Townsend, Leah Townsend, Leah Townsend. The early pages were clumsy, the loops too fat, the T crossed at the wrong slant. By the last pages, it was perfect, smoother than my real hand on a night shift. Page after page of my own name, practiced like piano scales, until the forgery played better than I did. I stood in my mother's dining room holding proof that this was never impulse, never desperation in a bad month. This was rehearsal. Someone had sat at a table, probably this table, and trained. Under the practice sheets, there was more. Bank statements, neatly clipped, and the name on them stopped my breath in a different way. Margaret Townsend, my grandmother. Statements from 2019, 2020, 2021. Her last 2 years. I heard the porch door begin to slide. I photographed everything my phone could hold. Practice pages, statements, the folder itself where it lay. Then squared the napkins, closed the glass, and was drying the roasting pan when my mother came back in, still glowing from her call. "You didn't have to stay, honey." I told her it was nothing. That's what family does. The morning after the hutch, I stopped collecting and started filing, because evidence you're merely hoarding is just anxiety with tabs. I ran the whole binder through the copier at the UPS store, twice. One set went into a safe deposit box at my credit union, with Gary the butterscotch man as my witness that it existed on that date. The other came home to the closet door operation. Then I sat down at my laptop, went to the FTC's identity theft site, and began the report I'd been circling for 6 weeks. It's a good form, thorough, built by people who've heard every version of this story. It walks you through the accounts, the dates, the amounts, and I had everything ready, tabbed, cross-referenced. I was the valedictorian of identity theft reporting. Then I reached the field that stops people like me. Relationship to the person who used your information, a drop-down menu, polite as a waiting room. I looked at the choices, and the cursor blinked over the word like it was asking, "Are you sure?" Parent. I got up, poured a glass of water I didn't drink, sat back down, and chose it. Both of them, so I filled it out twice. Filed. A confirmation number came back, bland and eternal, and I wrote it on the first page of the binder like a case number because that's what it was. The first official brick in the wall between me and my family. I scheduled an appointment with the Kettering Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit for the following week, the earliest slot they had. Then the doorbell rang, 2 sharp knocks behind it, and Walt stood on my mat with his jaw set. Sedan came back, he said. 20 minutes ago. This time the fella measured. Front door and the slider in back. He ran a tape on both, wrote it down, and left. Measured. You measure a door when you're planning to change what's on it. I spent that Saturday turning my condo from a home into a position, and I did it legally, calmly, and with receipts. A new deadbolt went on the front door, a better one, and a doorbell camera went up over the mat. My door, my right. No permission needed, which felt poetic. The slider in back got a steel bar. And then I did the thing I'm proudest of, the thing that made Walt laugh his gravel laugh when I told him. I emptied the firebox. Every real document, deed, birth certificates, Noah's social security card, the certified POA copies, Grandma's old savings bond, went into the safe deposit box downtown, next to the duplicate binder. The gray firebox itself stayed exactly where it had always lived, on the closet shelf, visible from the bedroom doorway, weighing what it always weighed, because I filled it with photocopies of nothing. Junk mail, expired coupons, and one sheet of printer paper, blank. If someone came for my paper life, they would find exactly what they had earned. Nothing. I stood in the closet doorway admiring the little gray decoy and understood, in a distant way, that I had just built a trap without knowing yet who would walk into it or when. That answer came Sunday evening by phone, wrapped in frosting. Mom, bright as ever, confirming Wednesday one more time. And then, casual as a napkin, she moved the future around. Oh, and don't plan anything for us Friday. Your father has a little bank appointment Friday morning, some paperwork thing, and then we're free all weekend. A little bank appointment. Some paperwork thing. I said Friday was fine, wished her good night, and stood in my kitchen listening to the refrigerator hum its one note. I didn't know yet what was scheduled for Friday. I only knew that whatever it was, my mother had just told me the deadline. Between shifts that week, I finally sat down with the photos from the hutch, my grandmother's bank statements, and gave them the reading they deserved. Margaret Townsend spent her last 2 years living at my parents' house, so Carol can look after her. And I remembered those years in fragments. Grandma smaller every visit, her Buick sold, her peppermints running low. I remembered her fretting more than once that her pension money kept coming up short. And I remembered, this is the part that sits in my chest, the whole table chuckling about it. Grandma's getting forgetful. Bless her heart. I had chuckled too. I was 29 and busy, and it was easier to believe in a fading memory than a feeding hand. The statements did not chuckle. They showed a pattern as regular as tide. Withdrawals, month after month, from an account with a caregiver card attached. Small enough to look like groceries, steady enough to add up. I ran the columns twice with the calculator I chart with. $23,000 over her last 2 years, out of a schoolteacher's pension, gone in bites. The last withdrawal cleared 4 days before she died. 4 days. I put the phone down and sat with that for a while. Here's what I want you to understand about my grandmother. She wasn't forgetful. The evidence was upstairs in my own history. The $40,000 CD she'd locked away years earlier, the one nobody could touch. The one that came to me in her will and became the down payment on this condo. She hadn't lost her money. She'd hidden the last of it from her own daughter-in-law, in the only vault she trusted, and then she'd handed that vault to me. I owed Grandma Margaret an apology I could only deliver one way now, with receipts. I added her statements to the binder behind a new tab. I made it red. The Financial Crimes Unit of the Kettering PD lives in a low-ceilinged room that smells like toner, and Detective Marla Reyes turned out to be a compact woman in her 40s, with reading glasses on a chain and a handshake like a door closing. I gave her the binder and said as little as possible, which I could tell she appreciated. She read for 20 minutes without speaking, flipping, backtracking, flattening pages with her palm, while I sat there with my hands folded, feeling the specific vertigo of watching a stranger read your life. Her first question, when it came, was not about my parents. "Who else has copies?" she said. "A bank vault," I said. She nodded once. the way I nod when a new nurse hands me a chart done right. She asked her questions in tight little rows. When I found each piece, who knew whether I'd confronted anyone? No confrontation, I said. Nothing's changed in my voice. Tuesday dinners, as usual. Reyes looked at me over the glasses for a moment. That's unusual, she said. Most people can't do that. I told her I sedate people for a living. Staying level is the job. And then she did the thing that changed the temperature of everything. She slid one page back across the table, Gary's note about the verification request from the unknown lender, and tapped it twice with one finger. All of this, she said, gesturing at 12 years of binder, is history. Prosecutable maybe, but history. This page is different. I waited. Somebody ordered an asset check on your condo last month. That's underwriting behavior. Underwriting means money that hasn't moved yet. She took off the glasses and looked at me straight. Ms. Townsend, this isn't a case about what your parents did. It's a case about what they're doing. She kept the binder. I drove home 15 minutes with the windows down, and for the first time in 6 weeks, I felt the current change direction. Reyes called me at work 3 days later, and I took it in the medroom with my back against the supply shelves. We found the thing that's in motion, she said. No preamble, which I already loved about her. There's a home equity loan in underwriting at a regional lender. Borrower of record, Leah Townsend. Collateral, your condo on Maple Crossing. Application signed under the 2019 power of attorney. I asked how much. $85,000. The number went through me clean, like cold saline. $85,000 against the only door that was ever only mine, signed by a document forged while I was learning to hold my son. There's more, and I need you steady for this part, Reyes said. The loan is scheduled to close and fund this Friday. Friday. Dad has a little bank appointment Friday morning, some paperwork thing. My mother had told me the deadline herself, wrapped in cake talk, 10 days in advance. Then Reyes explained the play, and I stood very still among the IV bags and listened. The bank's fraud unit had my affidavit. The loan was already flagged, dead in the water, frozen from the inside. But nothing about it would look frozen from the outside. No letters, no calls, no alarms. The application would keep showing clear to close, right up until somebody walked in Friday morning to sign final documents and collect certified funds. We let it look alive, Reyes said. Frozen solid, 3 days before your birthday, and the people who built it have no idea they're already standing on the ice. I signed the supplemental affidavit that afternoon, the one that names names. Driving home, I did the math the way you do a drip rate. The loan dies Friday. My birthday dinner is Wednesday. Whatever my mother still needed to make Friday work, whatever she needed from inside my apartment, she now had a window of about 48 hours to get it, and she'd already reserved the table. You want to know what dramatic irony tastes like? It tastes like wedding-grade sweetness delivered through a phone speaker while you stand in your kitchen knowing everything. Mom called Monday, 2 days out, to walk me through the birthday itinerary like a cruise director. Dinner at 6:30 because your father gets grumbly if the roast waits. The cake would be picked up at 4. Lemon, 3 layers. Ruthie is bringing her good candles. The cousins would come at 6. Just family, sweetheart. Everyone under one roof, the way it should be. And then, gliding, midstream, the sentence she'd been building the whole call to disguise. And Friday morning, your dad and I have our little bank thing, and after that, honey, everything is going to be so much lighter around here. I can feel it. So much lighter. I looked out my window at the parking lot where Noah's bike lay on its side in the grass, and I kept my voice in its lane, the way I do when a family asks me if their father is going to be okay, and the answer is no. That's great, Mom. Lemon sounds perfect. She talked for 3 more minutes. I supplied the murmurs. When she finally rang off, I stood there holding the warm phone and feeling the strangest cocktail of my life, fury and pity shaken together over ice. She was so happy. She was planning frosting and felony in the same breath, so certain the week would end her way that she was already spending the relief. She had no idea the loan under her Friday was already dead, that her paperwork thing was a room where people would be waiting for her signature the way a scale waits for weight. There was still one piece I couldn't see. What, exactly, Wednesday night was for. My phone buzzed against my ear. The school. Noah forgot his lunch. Life keeps interrupting a stakeout. I went and delivered a peanut butter sandwich. Tuesday, the day before my birthday, my father came to my condo alone, and that had happened maybe 4 times in 5 years. He brought a small box of wood screws. For that shelf you mentioned, a shelf I'd mentioned in April, and stood on my doormat turning his cap in his hands like a man at a rail crossing. I didn't invite him in. We talked about nothing for 2 minutes. The heat, the Reds' bullpen, Noah's bike. The whole time his eyes kept sliding off me and landing on the door. On the hinge side first, then the strike plate, then the shining new deadbolt, brushed nickel, obviously fresh, and I watched him notice it, and I watched him work at not being seen noticing it. "Put in new hardware?" he finally said, so carefully casual it nearly broke my heart. "Locks wear out," I said. He nodded at the deadbolt like it was a dog that might bite. "Good lock," he said. "Cautious is right. You always were the careful one." And then my father looked at me, actually looked, for the first time in longer than I could remember, and for about 2 seconds something moved behind his face, something with weight to it, something almost like a warning trying to find a door out. It didn't find one. He handed me the screws, said his goodbyes, and drove off in the truck he's had since I was in high school. I stood on the mat and let myself feel the mistake. He'd seen the new lock. That information was going home to my mother, into the machine, and whatever Wednesday was for, the machine would now adjust. That night, my doorbell camera pinged at 9:41. The gray sedan again, rolling slow through the lot, past my building, no stops. Third pass. Whatever was coming, it now knew about the deadbolt too. Good, I thought, surprising myself. Let them bring better tools. Tuesday night, my kitchen hosted the strangest planning meeting of my life. An ICU nurse, a retired deputy, and a financial crimes detective drinking decaf around a table with a crayon drawing of biscuit on it. Walt had brought the intel that snapped the last piece in. His locksmith friend downtown, 30 years of favors runs deep, had heard a thing. A commercial job booked for Wednesday evening, a full rekey at a Maple Crossing address, ordered by a woman describing herself as the family's property manager. The unit owner, she'd explained, was away at a family event, and the family handles her affairs. Rhea set down her mug. "That's the window. She needs what's in that firebox before Friday's closing. Originals, the deed, whatever the title company flagged. Your dinner isn't a party. It's an alibi she's throwing for you." Strange to hear it said out loud that plainly. My mother had scheduled my birthday the way you schedule a distraction. Reyes laid out the law in her tidy rows. A rekey ordered by a non-owner. Entry into the unit. That's when a paper case becomes handcuffs. An overt act. In progress. Witnessed. If they attempt it, we're there. Nobody touches your home. Then everyone looked at me because the plan had a moving part, and the moving part was me. I said it before anyone else had to. The only night they're certain I'm out of that apartment, with witnesses, all evening, is Wednesday. So I go to my birthday dinner, and I smile, and I eat the lemon cake. I want one thing understood. I set no trap. I invented nothing, suggested nothing, dangled nothing. They had built this schedule themselves, booked the locksmith themselves, chosen my birthday themselves. All I declined to do was warn them. Walt walked Reyes out. At the door, she turned. "Then Wednesday night," she said, "we'll be in your parking lot before the cake." I couldn't sleep after they left, so I did what I do instead of sleeping. I finished a chart. The Hutch photos were all in the binder now, but I'd been putting off the last cross-check, Margaret's statements against the family calendar, because I knew it would cost me. It did. Laid side by side, the pattern told a story with 3 acts. Act 1, 2019. Grandma moves in, and the caregiver card appears on her account for groceries and prescriptions, and the withdrawals begin. Modest, plausible. Act 2, 2020. The amounts creep up, and here's the detail that stopped me. Twice that year, the statements show declined attempts, the account briefly locked, then unlocked again within days. She fought. 83 years old, no computer, no ally in the house, and my grandmother still called somebody, still locked that account, and twice somebody with a caregiver card and a honeyed phone voice got it unlocked. Act 3, 2021. The withdrawals steady out, right up until the last one, 4 days before her heart quit. And threaded through all of it, the thing that finally made me put the pen down. She never stopped protecting the CD. $40,000, locked years deep, untouchable without her signature in person. The one fortress a schoolteacher's caution built that a daughter-in-law's sweetness couldn't talk open. That's the money that came to me. That's the money under my condo. My mother wanted into my apartment before Friday, into my firebox, after my papers, and I understood now that in her accounting she wasn't even stealing, she was collecting. Margaret's last fortress had walls again, and the same woman was at the gate with the same honeyed voice, and the quiet ones were supposed to hand over the keys. I closed the binder and turned off the light. Tomorrow was my birthday. I intended to enjoy the cake. There was one more thing in the Hutch photos I haven't told you about, because I needed to sit with it first. Under Margaret's statements at the very bottom of the folder, someone had kept a little archive of the year 2008. The foreclosure notice on Townsend print and copy, my father's shop on Wayne Avenue, and behind it, a handwritten draft of a letter in Dad's blocky pencil to a man at the bank. I read it twice and had to stop both times. My father, a man I have never heard raise his voice or finish a feeling, begging, misspelled, crossed out, rewritten. He would take any terms, work any schedule, if they could keep the house, because his mother lived with them now and his kids shouldn't move schools. And in the margin, in my mother's handwriting, small and final as a stamp, "Stop begging, I'll handle it." I know what that margin note was. It was a coronation. Somewhere in 2008, my father knelt down in pencil, and my mother stepped over him and took the family books, and he was so relieved to be spared the shame that he never asked how she handled anything ever again. It explains him. The label peeling, the weather talk, the eyes that slide to the floor. For about a minute at my kitchen table, I felt genuinely sorry for Frank Townsend. I'll admit that. A man drowning in 2008 grabbing the first rope, even one with a hook in it. But here's where I landed, and I want to say it carefully, because it's the whole spine of this story. Shame explains the first signature. It doesn't explain the next 11 years of them. Every March, every renewal, every bank error, sweetheart. My father chose the quiet again. Drowning men get one free grab. After that, they're just swimming with the current that's pulling their daughter under. Wednesday came up hot and blue. An ordinary July Wednesday with sprinklers ticking, and the strangest part of the whole day was how normal the morning managed to be. I made pancakes. Noah ate 4 and negotiated for a 5th, and we took his bike out to the lot where Walt was already installed on his porch with coffee, pretending he wasn't watching my building, doing his watching anyway. Noah wobbled, corrected, found the line, and did his first full lap without a foot down while Biscuit barked the play-by-play, and Walt raised his mug like a race official, and my son looked back at me with his whole face open. "Mom, did you see?" I saw, baby. I saw everything. Packing his overnight bag for Tessa's felt like the only part of the plan that mattered. Pajamas, toothbrush, the stuffed raccoon he pretends he doesn't need anymore. He asked, halfway into the truck seat, "It's your birthday, but I get a sleepover? Do I still get cake?" I told him Tessa was making brownies, which outrank cake, and that Grandma's party would be boring. All grown-ups, no games. He accepted the trade. At Tessa's door, I hugged him longer than the occasion called for, and he squirmed free the way 7-year-olds are supposed to, and that was correct. And I drove away with my hands at 10 and 2. Tessa had asked no questions when I'd called. she'd just said. Bring him whenever. Keep him however long. Nurses. Back home, the condo was clean and quiet. Firebox on its shelf, full of nothing. New deadbolt shining. Camera awake over the mat. I laid my dress on the bed, the blue one, good for sitting still in, and looked at the whole arrangement for a moment. The evidence was banked. The child was safe. The table was set. All that was left was the part only I could do. Show up and be lied to. Beautifully. One last time. I had 1 hour to kill before getting dressed, and I spent it doing a final pass through the binder, the way I do a last set of vitals before shift change. That's when I found the page I'd almost skimmed past, the one from the bottom of the 2008 stack, the recent one, the one whose name I'd caught out of the corner of my eye at Tuesday dinner week and filed for later. Later had arrived. It was a credit bureau notice, dated 5 weeks back. A hard inquiry. An application-triggered pull from a card company. And the name on the inquiry was not Leah Townsend. It was Noah Townsend. My son. 7 years old, a social security number I'd watched get issued at a hospital desk, and 5 weeks ago somebody had typed it into an application. The playbook wasn't just still open. It had a new chapter started, and the chapter was my child. The same move they'd run on me in 2014. The account planted early, the mail kept close, the harvest scheduled for decades. They'd waited until I moved out to start on me. They hadn't even waited for Noah to lose his baby teeth. What I did next took 11 minutes, timed by the microwave clock, because rage in my line of work converts to procedure or it kills somebody. I froze my son's credit at all 3 bureaus. Minors can be frozen. Every parent listening should know that. And I photographed the confirmation screens. Then I called Reyes and read her the inquiry, date and creditor, and heard her go quiet for a second, which from Reyes is a lot. Add it to the affidavit, she said. A minor changes things. Judges read that page first. I hung up, got dressed, and zipped the blue dress myself. They taught me one last thing that afternoon. I wasn't ending this for me. Reyes called back at 4:15 for the final walkthrough, and it was shorter than a MedPass handoff. Her people would be in the Maple Crossing lot by 6, 2 unmarked cars, positioned for the door and the slider. Walt had formally requested permission to drink tea at his own front window, which Reyes granted with the first laugh I'd heard from her, short and quickly retired. My job was a list of nothing. Arrive at 6:30, be seen, be ordinary, keep my phone face down and my face on. One rule, Reyes said, and her voice put its glasses on. Whatever happens at that table, whatever gets said, whoever stands up, wherever Kyle goes, let it happen. Don't warn them. Don't stall them. Don't help them either. You're not an officer. You're not bait. You're a guest at your own birthday. The only thing you can do wrong tonight is participate. I told her I'd spent 34 years training for the role of woman at a table saying nothing, and she said, then go graduate, and hung up, because Reyes exits every conversation like it's a car she's done driving. I stood in front of the mirror and did the last check, the one that matters. Not the dress, the face. At work we call it your nurse face, the surface that stays warm and level while the room behind it runs a code. Eyes soft, jaw loose, the smile that reassures and reveals nothing. I have held that face through things I don't talk about at parties. I could hold it through pot roast. 15 minutes across town, windows down, July air. I parked behind Aunt Ruth's Buick and sat for one breath looking at the house I grew up in. Porch light on, dining room glowing gold, my mother's silhouette crossing the window with a stack of the good plates. Somewhere behind me, across town, a locksmith van was checking its clock. So was Detective Reyes. So was I. My mother opened the door before I knocked, which she has done my whole life, as if the house itself reports to her. There's my birthday girl. She smelled like Shalimar and lemon frosting, and she hugged me with both arms, and I hugged her back, and felt, through the familiar wool of her cardigan, how small she actually is. This woman who has rearranged 12 years of my life with a landline and a pen. The house was staged to the rafters. The never-used tablecloth, ironed to a shine. The good plates in formation. Candles on the sideboard. Ruthie's good candles. And the lemon cake boxed on the counter like a hostage. Aunt Ruth got to me second. Held me at arm's length. Said I looked tired in the way that means loved, and slipped me a card she didn't want Mom to see, because Ruth has always understood the house rules better than anyone. The cousins arrived with wine. Dad was stationed at the grill window, label already half off his bottle, and when I said, "Hi, Dad," he said, "Hey, kiddo, happy birthday," to a spot slightly left of my eyes. Kyle came last, showered, pressed, boots traded for sneakers, and he ruffled my hair like I was 9, and I let him, and something in my chest took a note and put it away. Before we walk into that dining room, one thing. I spent 6 weeks pretending everything was fine, smiling through Tuesday dinners, passing potatoes to the people who were robbing my son. If you have ever sat at a table and acted normal to protect what's yours, you already know this part of the story in your bones. Stay with me. The next hour took 12 years to build. Subscribe if you're staying till the locks come off. Because from here, nobody leaves this house the same. Dinner ran like one of Mom's productions always runs. On time, on script, applause cued. Pot roast, the carrots Kyle likes, rolls in the cloth-lined basket that only appears for company. My mother conducted from the head of the table, refilling, redirecting, trimming every conversation back toward pleasant, and I ate and laughed on cue, and monitored the room like a telemetry screen. Dad was quiet even for Dad, building a small cairn of beer label shavings beside his plate. Kyle kept sneaking looks at his phone in his lap, then at the kitchen clock, then at Mom, a triangle he flew maybe 5 times between the roast and the salad. Aunt Ruth told the story about the raccoon in her chimney, which gets better every year. And then my mother stood, dinged her glass with her ring finger, and gave the toast. She's good. I want that on the record. She is genuinely good. She talked about family being the only thing that lasts, about roots and branches, about how proud she was of our Leah, our nurse, and the cousins made warm sounds, and Ruth beamed, and Dad studied the tablecloth like scripture, and she landed it with her arms spread the width of the room. Everything you have, Leah, came from this family. The table gave a little awe. I raised my glass with the rest of them, looked my mother in the eye, and drank the whole thing down. And if you'd been watching from the doorway, you'd have seen a daughter toasting her lucky life. Only 2 people at that table knew what the sentence actually meant, and one of us was smiling into a wine glass, and the other was checking the kitchen clock again. 6:40 now, with the busy, counting eyes of a woman whose evening had a second act scheduled. I set down my glass and complimented the roast. The candles on the cake stayed unlit in their box, waiting. Between the roast and the cake, my phone buzzed once against my leg. Reyes and I had a protocol. Nothing tonight unless it couldn't wait. I excused myself to the bathroom off the hall, the one with the seashell soaps no one may use, locked the door, and read the message. 2 photographs. The first was the certified POA, the recorder's copy. But a clean scan this time, pulled from the notary's own retained file, the smear resolved into handwriting at last. Witness number 2, March 14th, 2019. In a slanting hand I would have known anywhere on this earth. Kyle Frank Townsend. The second photo was a loan payoff record, March 2019. An $11,000 truck loan, Kyle's, settled in full in a single payment from an account belonging to Frank and Carol Townsend, 9 days after the notary date. Reyes's caption was one line, "Confirmed this afternoon. Thought you should have it before you look at him again." I stood in my mother's bathroom holding the phone over the seashell soaps, and I did the math I never wanted to do. The week I was wired to a monitor with our son, my brother stood at a notary's counter and swore he watched me sign, and the truck he'd washed and gleamed and bragged on at every dinner since, best thing I ever did, getting that loan gone. I'd been riding in the bed of that lie for 7 years. Kyle, who carried me across Clear Creek at church camp because the rocks scared me, $11,000. That's the number my brother sold me for. Something in my chest didn't break the way I'd braced for. It just went quiet and efficient, and filed him under a new tab. I flushed for the audience, washed my hands with regular soap, and came back to the table smiling. Mom was leaning toward Dad's ear, and the whole room slowed down because I knew the sentence before she said it. The candles were going into the cake, Ruth counting them out loud, the cousins arguing over whether 34 needs all 34, when my mother leaned over to my father, dropped her voice to the register she thinks is private, and said it. "Since everyone's here, have your son change the locks at her apartment. 10 seconds maybe, start to finish." Dad's jaw worked once, like a man swallowing a pill without water. He didn't look at her, didn't look at me, gave the smallest nod I've ever seen a grown man produce, and touched Kyle on the shoulder as he reached past him for the coffee carafe. And Kyle, my brother, witness number 2, best thing I ever did, set his napkin beside his plate, stood, and said he had to take a call about a job estimate. He was already thumbing his keyring out of his pocket, the keyring with his truck key, and I'd have bet the condo, one shiny new key that fit nothing yet. Aunt Ruth called after him, "Kyle, we're about to do the cake." And he said, "2 minutes, Ruthie, start without me." And the screen door clapped shut behind him, and his headlights swung out of the driveway toward Kettering, toward my home, toward the firebox full of expired coupons, the deadbolt he didn't know about, the doorbell camera already awake, and the 2 unmarked cars parked in the summer dark with their engines off. I did the hardest shift of my nursing career at that table, and it lasted 61 minutes, monitoring a patient who had no idea she was already coding. I ate my slice of lemon cake. I told Ruth it was the best one Ashley's had ever made, and meant it. My mother relaxed by degrees, chattering about Friday being a fresh start, and I agreed that it would be. The kitchen clock ticked. Headlights, when they finally came back up the driveway, came fast. The front door opened hard enough to knock the wreath askew, and my brother came into that dining room the way trauma cases come through the ER doors, moving fast, already too late. His face had gone the color of hospital sheets. His keyring hung from his finger upside down, and he crossed to my mother's chair without a word to anyone, bent to her ear, and tried to whisper. But the room had gone silent the moment they saw him, the kind of silence that turns a whisper into a broadcast, and every person at that table heard my brother say, "Mom, there. There were police at her building. They stopped the locksmith in the lot. They had paper. Mom. A warrant. A detective. They knew my name when I got out of the truck." He swallowed. "They knew about Friday." The room did not explode. That's the thing nobody tells you about detonations inside families. The first second is pure vacuum. Ruth's hand stopped halfway to her mouth. One cousin set down a fork with a click that sounded like a gavel. Dad went gray around the lips and very carefully placed both hands flat on the tablecloth, a man bracing a table that wasn't moving. And my mother? My mother smiled. It hung on her face a full second past its expiration, the hostess smile, dying in place, while her eyes went around the table doing arithmetic. Who heard? How much? What could still be managed? I watched the exact moment the math came back unsolvable. Then Dad's phone rang against the wood, too loud, and he flinched like it had teeth, and the screen sat face up where everyone could read the caller ID, the bank's regional office, on a Wednesday night, 2 days early. He didn't answer it. It rang itself out into voicemail in front of 11 silent people, and into that ringing my mother turned, at last, not to her husband, not to her son, standing wrecked at her shoulder, but to me, still seated, napkin in my lap, birthday cake finished, because she knew. Before a single card was shown, my mother looked down the length of her table and found the person who had stopped being managed, and I watched her understand it, and I did not look away. She stood up so fast her chair barked against the floor. "What did you do?" Low first, then rising through the octaves as the hostess burned off, and what lives underneath came out. "Leah, what did you do? You called the police on your own family? On your mother and father?" Ruth said, "Carol, and got a hand slashed through the air for it. Everything I have done for this family. You, ungrateful. Everything you have came from this family. And there it was, the toast again, offered this time at full volume with spit on it. I stayed in my chair. I kept my hands folded on my napkin, and I used the voice I use at 2 in the morning when a family is screaming at a monitor. The one that doesn't rise because it doesn't need to. You're right, Mom. Even the debt. The sentence landed in the room like instruments going quiet. I didn't call the police on my family. I filed a report about 2 people who forged my name while I was in a hospital bed, having your grandson. My mother's mouth opened, and I set one piece of paper on the tablecloth, face up, and slid it toward the middle where everyone could reach it. Not the binder, just one page. That's a credit inquiry from 5 weeks ago, I said, still level. Run on a 7-year-old. Pass it around. Ruth got there first. I watched my aunt read her great-nephew's name, and age 10 years, and set the page down like it was hot. Carol, she said in a voice I'd never heard from her. He is 7. My mother didn't look at the page. That told the room more than the page did. She swung between registers looking for one that still worked. Tears first. I sacrificed everything. Nobody knows what I've carried. Then blame. Your father handled the accounts. Ask him. And Dad, gray, both hands still flat on the table, chose that moment to spend the only honest sentence I've ever heard him volunteer. She's telling the truth. All of it. He didn't look up while he said it. And he sat back like the words had cost him his skeleton, and it was late. It was 12 years late, but the room heard it. Kyle stood wrecked by the china hutch, and I looked at him last. 11,000 for your signature, Kyle. You want to know what it bought? Ask my son. My mother made her last stand the way generals do, from the high ground that had already fallen. She pulled herself straight, chin up, and played the card that had beaten every hand at this table for 40 years. I am your mother. This is my house, and we are your family, and family doesn't need permission. I stood then, finally, unhurried, and collected my purse from the back of my chair. It does now, I said. It's called a warrant. Nobody followed me to the kitchen except Ruth. I took the cake box off the counter. More than half the lemon cake left, boxed and beautiful. And my aunt, God bless her forever, didn't say a single word about it. Just opened the back door for me. I bought my own cake once when I was 12, I told her, with babysitting money, because that year's budget was tight. Tonight, I'm just taking what's mine. Ruth put both hands on my face. You call me, she said. Whenever. I mean it, Leah Ann. Behind us, in the dining room, my mother's voice had found the phone and Dad's name and the word lawyer, in that order. I drove the 15 minutes home with the windows down and the cake belted into the passenger seat like a good citizen. The Maple Crossing lot was quiet again. The locksmith van long gone, one unmarked car still sitting dark at the far end, with the patience of the eventually paid. At his front window, backlit by a lamp, Walt stood with a mug, and as I passed under the streetlight, he gave me a nod. The small, formal, 2-inch nod of a deputy at shift's end. Biscuit's tail thumped once against the glass. My new deadbolt turned like silk. The first door that was ever only mine. The next 2 weeks moved the way justice actually moves. On paper, at printer speed. Charges were filed. Identity fraud, forgery, and theft against my mother. Forgery and complicity against my father. The search warrant brought the manila folder out of the china hutch in an evidence bag, practice pages and all, and I'm told the detectives passed it around the unit like a museum piece. Kyle came in with a lawyer on day 3 and told all of it, the notary counter, the truck loan, Wednesday night, and signed on as a cooperating witness, which bought him a misdemeanor and a debt no court can schedule. The $85,000 never funded. My condo's title stayed clean. The $19,400 came off my name account by account, each deletion letter filed behind its red tab. At her arraignment, My mother pleaded not guilty and told the judge it was all a family misunderstanding. The system she'd gamed for 12 years finally read her file. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, my whole world fit inside one parking lot. And it was enough. Noah did bike laps around the islands, faster now, cornering like he'd been born to it, while Walt called out lap times he was clearly inventing and Biscuit refereed from the grass. Tessa came by with coffee and stayed on the stoop an hour. My mail comes to one address now. Mine. And I open every envelope the day it arrives, which sounds small unless you've lived this story, in which case, you know it's the whole prize. Aunt Ruth calls every Sunday after church. Sometimes we talk about the case. Mostly we talk about raccoons and rising bread and Noah's spelling tests, which is its own kind of medicine. The cousins send funny cards. Family, it turns out, was never the people at the head of the table. It's the ones who stand up from it when the truth arrives. I don't take the calls from my parents' lawyer, and there's a number I never saved that I've let ring out twice. Kyle texted me in September. Long, careful, sorry in every paragraph. I read the whole thing standing at my kitchen counter, and then I put the phone down and finished making dinner. And I haven't answered. And I haven't blocked him. Some doors you don't slam. You just stop oiling the hinges. As for Noah, I told him the truth in the size he could carry. Grandma did something dishonest with Mommy's name, and it's grown-up trouble, and none of it, not 1 ounce, was his fault. And people who love him don't need his name to prove it.